December 1940 cast a bitter shadow over the Ardennes forest in Belgium. Snow fell in relentless sheets, blanketing the pine trees and the narrow, winding roads that snaked through the region. In the heart of this frozen wilderness, a small contingent of American soldiers huddled in a hastily established forward observation outpost near the town of Bastogne. Their mission seemed straightforward on paper: monitor German troop movements, protect vital supply lines, and hold the line until reinforcements could arrive. In reality, the men were on the edge of an inferno, a powder keg of tension, hunger, and fear. One wrong decision or a single miscalculation by the enemy could doom them all. Amid the swirling snow, the soldiers noticed unusual signs: fresh tracks, glimpses of figures in the distance, and an eerie silence that made even the wind seem like an intruder. They knew that the Germans were preparing something monumental, but the exact nature of the threat remained obscured. The tension was suffocating. Every creak of timber, every whistle of the wind through the frozen branches could be the prelude to a storm that might engulf them entirely. One soldier remarked quietly, almost to himself, that the Ardennes never felt so alive or so deadly. The outpost itself was a skeleton of defensive engineering. Trenches were dug into frozen earth, barbed wire snaked around their perimeter, and makeshift bunkers offered minimal protection against artillery or tank fire. Supplies were perilously low, rations were sparse, and ammunition stocks were limited. Communication lines with nearby units were thin and fragile. Yet, the soldiers worked tirelessly, improvising with whatever materials they could find. Each day was a test of endurance and ingenuity. Even as frostbite claimed fingers and toes, morale was quietly sustained by camaraderie and the knowledge that they were guarding something far larger than themselves. But on one frigid morning, a scout returned with unsettling news. German reconnaissance units had been spotted moving toward a nearby ridge, apparently testing the limits of the American defenses. The implications were immediate. If these patrols were probing for weaknesses, the full assault could come sooner than anyone expected. Every soldier felt the silent weight of anticipation pressing down, as though the snow itself conspired to hide the enemy's advance. In a frozen moment of dread, many wondered, could they survive what was coming? The men sent urgent messages to command, detailing the reconnaissance sightings and requesting reinforcements. But the snowbound roads and congested supply lines meant that help would be slow to arrive. Radios crackled with static, carrying only fragments of news from other sectors, amplifying the sense of isolation. The Ardennes were both a refuge and a trap, a place where terrain could protect or betray you in the same heartbeat. As night fell, the soldiers maintained vigilant watch over their positions, listening for the faintest rustle or shadow that might signal the enemy's advance. Fires were kept low, barely visible, and the men whispered to conserve warmth without betraying their location. Sleep was a luxury few could afford. The forest, though serene, seemed to hold its own secrets, and every crunch of footsteps on the snow set hearts racing. They sensed that the coming days would test them like never before, yet none could predict how. Please, if you're finding this story gripping, take a moment to click the subscribe button and like the video. It really helps more people discover these incredible moments in history. Early the next morning, a sudden flare of light in the eastern sky revealed a column of armored vehicles advancing with precision and speed. The American soldiers had prepared for an attack, but the scale was unlike anything they anticipated. Snow swirled around the tanks and infantry, masking their numbers and making it almost impossible to estimate the threat. The defenders had seconds, maybe minutes, to organize, fire, and hold the line. Every heart pounded with the knowledge that history could be written in a matter of hours in this frozen clearing near Bastogne. The first shots rang out, echoing through the forest like gunfire from an unseen phantom. Men scrambled from trenches, huddled behind trees, and tried desperately to maintain coordination. But the Germans were already testing their positions, probing for weaknesses with small, deliberate attacks. The Americans were vastly outnumbered, and for a moment, the fear that they might be overrun gripped every man's mind. The Ardennes, once a landscape of quiet snow and pine, became a crucible of chaos and courage. By midday, the snowstorm intensified, limiting visibility and creating a surreal battlefield of white and smoke. Small squads fought furiously, alternating between counterattacks and defensive maneuvers. The terrain that had seemed protective now became treacherous, as icy slopes and deep drifts slowed movement and sapped strength. Every shot, every explosion, was magnified by the silence of the forest, echoing across the hills and sending shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned soldiers. In the distance, through gaps in the trees, the American commanders caught glimpses of reinforcements attempting to break through snow-blocked roads, but progress was painfully slow. Time seemed to stretch, each moment pregnant with danger and uncertainty. And yet, amid the terror, a quiet determination took hold. These men knew that the fate of Bastogne and perhaps the larger Allied advance in Europe hung in the balance. One misstep, one lapse, could mean the end. And as night approached, the soldiers braced themselves for an onslaught that promised to push them beyond every limit of endurance, courage, and ingenuity. As dawn broke over the snow-blanketed Ardennes, the soldiers of the Bastogne outpost knew that preparation alone would not guarantee survival. The previous day's reconnaissance sightings had confirmed their worst fears. The Germans were methodically moving to encircle the town, and the American defenders were dangerously outnumbered. Yet, there was no time for despair. Every man, from the seasoned sergeant to the young privates fresh from training camps, had a role to play. They quickly organized, reinforcing trenches, distributing ammunition, and ensuring that every position could be defended if and when the enemy struck. The terrain presented a brutal challenge. Frozen mud and ice-covered roads slowed the movement of both men and equipment. Supplies that might have strengthened their defenses were often stuck miles away, trapped by snowdrifts or immobilized vehicles. Engineers and soldiers worked tirelessly, hand-digging fighting positions in solid frost, rigging barbed wire across open fields, and preparing obstacles designed to slow tanks and armored vehicles. It was grueling, exhausting work, yet the men knew that every spike of wire, every trench, every sandbag could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. Amid the flurry of activity, tension mounted. There were whispers among the soldiers about strange sightings on the ridges beyond their perimeter, flashes of movement, unexplained sounds, and the occasional shimmer of steel reflecting the pale winter sun. The defenders realized that the Germans were not just attacking, they were studying, probing, and planning with precision. It became clear that any lapse in vigilance could be catastrophic. Radio messages crackled intermittently with fragmented reports from nearby units. Supplies were scarce, and reinforcements could not arrive in time to guarantee relief. This stark reality forced the soldiers to rely on ingenuity and resourcefulness. Improvised barriers were erected from logs and debris, trenches were deepened with whatever tools were available, and even snow itself was molded to conceal positions or serve as crude insulation. Every tactic was designed to maximize effectiveness in the face of overwhelming odds. In the midst of these preparations, one soldier noticed unusual tracks leading around their southern flank, footprints too large for a single man and too deliberate to be accidental. Could this be the vanguard of the German assault? Every heart skipped a beat. They had trained for months to anticipate enemy movements, yet this glimpse of what might be coming sent a chill through the unit. The next few hours could change everything, and they all knew it. Commanders moved swiftly to organize the units into defensive sectors, ensuring that each trench, bunker, and firing position covered as much of the open ground as possible. Artillery placements were carefully adjusted, targeting the approaches most likely to be used by the advancing Germans. Meanwhile, small teams patrolled the perimeter to watch for infiltration attempts. The soldiers operated on a razor's edge. A single mistake, a miscommunication, or an overlooked path could allow the enemy to break through. Amid the relentless cold and growing tension, morale became both fragile and vital. Stories of past bravery, letters from home, and whispered jokes circulated among the troops to keep despair at bay. Some soldiers resorted to quiet meditation or prayer, seeking comfort in the knowledge that they were part of something far larger than themselves. Yet, in the back of every mind was the same haunting thought: The German offensive could begin at any moment, and their preparations might still be insufficient. Then, as the first artillery shells landed on nearby outposts, a tense silence fell over Bastogne. The defenders knew the Germans were testing their mettle, gauging the strength and response of each position. Explosions rattled trees, sending snow and debris flying. The soldiers scrambled to maintain their lines, returning fire whenever possible, but the sheer scale of the enemy threat was becoming undeniable. They had done everything they could, yet the coming battle promised to push them beyond any limit they had ever imagined. The soldiers glanced at each other, gripping their weapons, bracing for the onslaught that had been long anticipated but now felt terrifyingly close. Would their fortifications hold? Could their small unit withstand the storm of German tanks and infantry that seemed to be converging from every direction? Every second that passed brought them closer to the moment of truth and to the brink of history being rewritten in the snow of the Ardennes. Before dawn broke on December 16, 1944, the Ardennes forest was shrouded in a heavy, almost unnatural silence. The snow fell steadily, muffling the sounds of movement and masking the advance of the German forces. The soldiers at Bastogne, wrapped in layers of frostbitten clothing and steel resolve, waited in tense anticipation. Years later, historians would describe this morning as the moment when bravery was measured not in grand strategy alone, but in sheer human endurance. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The distant roar of engines, the grinding of treads over ice, and the rhythmic clatter of boots on frozen ground signaled the beginning of the German offensive. Columns of tanks, armored vehicles, and infantry emerged from the haze, advancing with alarming speed. The defenders' preparations were tested instantly as the first volleys of artillery slammed into the outpost, sending snow, splintered wood, and frozen earth flying through the air. It was chaos, but beneath it all, the soldiers relied on discipline honed by months of training and the unspoken understanding that their actions in these next hours would determine not just their survival, but the fate of Bastogne itself. American machine guns opened fire from concealed bunkers, mowing down waves of advancing infantry. Small artillery pieces, positioned strategically in the frozen landscape, erupted with precision, targeting armored vehicles before they could reach the trenches. Yet, despite their valor, the defenders faced overwhelming odds. The enemy's strength seemed limitless, their advance relentless. One soldier peered through the snowstorm and glimpsed a German officer coordinating movements with methodical precision. The Americans had anticipated an assault, but the scale and speed of this attack defied expectation, threatening to overwhelm even the best-laid defenses. Amid the roar of battle, small groups of American troops found themselves isolated, cut off from their units, forced to fight with limited ammunition and minimal communication. In the trenches, men shouted over gunfire, relaying orders, coordinating counterattacks, and keeping morale alive amid the freezing chaos. Every second mattered. Every decision could tip the balance between life and death. The forest, once a quiet protector, had become a battlefield of unseen threats, snow-drifted pitfalls, and the deadly calculus of war. The German assault intensified, with armored columns attempting to flank the defenders from the north and south simultaneously. The Americans responded with clever improvisation. They laid anti-tank mines in unexpected areas, constructed improvised barricades from debris and logs, and redirected fire to critical choke points. It was a grueling display of strategy and improvisation under extreme duress. Yet even as the soldiers executed these maneuvers, they could see that their numbers were slowly being worn down, and the question lingered, could Bastogne survive this relentless storm of fire and steel? Please take a moment to click the subscribe button and like the video. It helps share these incredible stories of courage with the world. Throughout the day, the battle became a series of vicious engagements, small pockets of Americans holding off superior forces with remarkable tenacity. Snow and smoke mixed in the air, reducing visibility to almost nothing, while men risked their lives to reinforce lines, rescue wounded comrades, and keep artillery firing. Every encounter was a test of endurance, every hour stretched into a lifetime of tension, fear, and determination. Some soldiers found themselves repeatedly repelling enemy advances with only a handful of rounds remaining, while others coordinated critical counterattacks that bought time for reinforcements that had yet to arrive. By late afternoon, the American defenders began to notice an unexpected development. German forces were pausing, regrouping, perhaps reassessing the situation. The snowstorm, while dangerous to the defenders, also concealed their movements, allowing small units to maneuver unseen. Using this advantage, soldiers moved to reinforce weak points, redistribute ammunition, and prepare for the final hours of the assault. Yet even as they gained brief tactical advantages, the looming question remained: how long could their outnumbered positions withstand the relentless pressure of the enemy? Even with artillery blazing and machine guns firing relentlessly, the American soldiers realized that victory was not yet certain. Every step forward could be met with deadly resistance. Every exposed flank was a potential death trap. Reinforcements from nearby units were still struggling through the snow, and the soldiers knew that they could not rely solely on luck. They had to depend on courage, strategy, and sheer human will. As night approached, a chilling realization swept through the trenches. The battle for Bastogne was far from over, and the true test of endurance and heroism had only just begun. As night fell over Bastogne, the relentless winter storm and the continuous pounding of artillery created a landscape of surreal devastation. Trenches had been shattered, snow mixed with mud and blood, and the air carried a bitter metallic tang. Yet, amidst the chaos, the small American garrison had held. By the evening of December 16th, the initial German onslaught had been blunted. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the soldiers' preparation, ingenuity, and courage had created a bulwark against the enemy advance. Their endurance would become a defining moment in the Battle of the Bulge, and a symbol of American resilience during the darkest hours of World War II. The aftermath of the first day's fighting revealed both the human cost and the strategic importance of Bastogne. The defenders had suffered casualties, some severe, but every position that held delayed the German advance. Every artillery round fired, every barricade constructed, and every coordinated counterattack bought precious time for reinforcements to make their way through the treacherous Ardennes roads. Soldiers huddled together in freezing bunkers, tending to the wounded, checking ammunition, and preparing for the inevitable follow-up attacks. In their exhaustion, they understood a profound truth: the small acts of bravery, the discipline, and the improvisation had collectively shaped the outcome of the engagement. Commanders on both sides took stock of the battle's evolving dynamics. For the Americans, the success of Bastogne's defense highlighted the critical value of small unit initiative and strategic improvisation. Every soldier, from the private in a trench to the officer coordinating artillery fire, had contributed to a defense that far exceeded expectations. The Germans, meanwhile, had underestimated both the terrain's complexity and the defenders' determination. Reports indicated confusion within the German ranks, slowed advances, and increasing frustration at the unexpected resistance. Bastogne, a seemingly minor crossroads town, had become a linchpin in the Ardennes campaign. As the following days unfolded, reinforcements under General George S. Patton's Third Army began to break through snow-blocked roads. The Americans had not only survived, they had set the stage for a decisive counteroffensive that would ultimately disrupt the German plan to divide Allied forces in Western Europe. Bastogne's defense demonstrated that strategic insight, preparation, and sheer human will could overcome overwhelming numerical disadvantage. Soldiers and commanders alike realized that their collective effort had saved not just a town, but a critical segment of the Allied front. Beyond the immediate military outcome, the Battle of Bastogne became a symbol of courage and endurance for generations to come. Stories of soldiers holding positions against impossible odds were retold in letters home, newspapers, and later in history books. The battle's narrative highlighted not only the physical challenges of warfare, freezing temperatures, harsh terrain, and logistical difficulties, but also the mental and emotional resilience required to withstand extreme pressure. It illustrated the profound human dimension of combat, loyalty to comrades, devotion to duty, and the unyielding determination to stand firm even when survival seemed uncertain. The Ardennes campaign, and Bastogne in particular, left an indelible mark on military strategy. Analysts and historians studied the engagement for lessons in logistics, fortification planning, intelligence interpretation, and the importance of rapid, flexible response to unexpected enemy movements. Modern military training often references the battle, emphasizing how small units, armed with ingenuity and discipline, can influence the outcome of large-scale operations. The actions of the soldiers at Bastogne have become a blueprint for understanding the complex interplay between terrain, preparation, and human courage in warfare. Even decades later, visiting Bastogne during winter evokes vivid memories of that historic stand. Monuments and museums commemorate the soldiers who endured unimaginable conditions, fought fiercely, and altered the course of the Battle of the Bulge. Survivors' testimonies describe the freezing nights, the deafening roar of artillery, and the bonds forged in the trenches, moments of quiet heroism amidst chaos. These stories remain poignant reminders of the cost of war and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. In reflection, Bastogne's defense underscores a timeless lesson: courage, preparation, and teamwork can transform vulnerability into strength. Though initially isolated and outnumbered, the American soldiers' steadfast defense disrupted German plans, preserved a critical strategic position, and left a legacy that endures in military history and popular imagination. The snow-covered Ardennes witnessed not only a battle of guns and tanks, but a profound testament to the capacity of ordinary individuals to achieve extraordinary outcomes. The Battle of Bastogne stands as a lasting symbol of endurance, tactical brilliance, and human resolve. It reminds us that even in the darkest hours, determination and courage can shape history. The stories of those who fought remain etched in memory, teaching generations the importance of preparation, resilience, and the unwavering commitment to stand against seemingly insurmountable odds.